we talked, in fact, 2 years ago when we did this interview. You were talking about opening night already. You just finished Chinese Bookie, and you were saying that you were talking with Gina already about the role, that you had a lot of conversations to prepare the film and so on. And how did it get on, and how did you finally come to the film? And did you start with the idea of the woman's problem and then elaborated the play, starting from her character, and because the play inside the film?
We started from the need of the autographed girl, I think, to see what need that would reflect on this actress. The idea had always been a woman sees in herself, in this young fan, everything that she was when she first entered into the profession of acting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way it started. And we built off of that first encounter and the girl's consequent death, which was always in there by accident.
But I suppose when you have a play like The Second Woman, which is not an original play, which is not a play, which a play that you wrote, sometimes in films about theater they use Chekhov or they use Shakespeare or whatnot. So they, of course, they have to take some scenes. But in that particular case, I suppose you had to write a complete play.
I had to write a complete play, which I never did, because I hated the play so much within the play that I could never write anything in continuity with it. And
you mean this play?
Yeah.
You hated it?
Yes, I hated it because I had to take it from an actor's point of view. An actor's point of view would be that they didn't want to play in the play, and the play was not a successful play. So you don't want to take someone else's work, because then you're saying that someone else's work is very bad.
Yes.
And it's a very dangerous thing to write a bad play.
Not only that, but very difficult. How can you write a bad play?
Yes. So I try to stay within the theme of the woman that wrote it, the Joan Blontel character who wrote the play. Was in her late 60s, and when she wrote the play, it was her definitive work on her life, that age does get the better of you, which is a depressing play to begin with, that age gets the better of you, even though there's some truth to it, and certainly from her point of view, there was a lot of truth to it. But it's very difficult for a woman Jenna's age to play that, because her life, as she expresses in the screenplay, is not over. She is not the same age. And her problems are different. Her problems are the problems of most women that have passed that first flush, when nothing can go wrong because the pinks, they don't need rouge or anything. They can just go out and be absolutely radiant just because their skin is so new. And so when the playwright writes his play, from the performing artist's point of view, there are two problems. One, the problem of sophistication, and the other, the problem of having to be part of that audience and understanding the character in relation to that audience. And when she can do neither, because she's accused of being so close to the character that she can't even argue her point reasonably any longer. Then she begins to investigate her own situation in her life and sees a great deal of truth in the character she's playing, but it still does not alter her deep feeling that she must communicate something hopeful to an audience, otherwise they will not listen. Which is not a philosophical point of view, except for the actress, that the audience will not listen to something unless it has something for them. If it had nothing for them, they're all going to leave. Consequently, she feels that the play is a bad play, and that it's anything you can do to change it would be marvelous, but she can't find anything to change it. because you can't alter something by yourself. So she employs everyone's aid, and no one will go. And finally, you know, only an actor who feels that maybe his part is being jeopardized or something, who's had an affair with her, suddenly makes a fool of himself and throws the play away. Well, that's not what she had intended. But she goes along and finds out of that just that one moment of just saying, no, we're not going to be dead. We're not going to project death as the main thrust of this play. We're going to project life and put age in its perspective. And I feel that's what happened. An interesting thing is that most literary people, people that have anything to do with writing, find that ending is just a terrible ending, simply because the author's play, no matter how bad the play is, runs into shambles.
Yeah,
you know,
it's put into pieces. Yeah,
and they get very angry at the actress, as they would in life, which also makes us all part of one continuing circle. The theater is the same as life. Life is the same as theater. The rituals may be slightly different. The problems are the same. They are always life problems. And then we as the audience, who look at the audience, who are looking at the play, I think respond very much the same way that the actual audience responds. It's very interesting to me to see the picture with responses, because I can't tell who is laughing or who's being irritated, the audience within the movie or the real audience.
But so you wrote the complete play finally, and then you chose certain scenes. Did you finally end up by writing it complete with scenes that we don't see in the film, or did you write only the specific scenes for the film?
These scenes, I mean, they were much longer, and I spent all my time in the rehearsals working with the actors on the play, writing different versions. The play was much longer and much more complete.
But you say much more complete, but was it ever complete?
No.
No, you just wrote pieces that you needed to reveal the character.
I outlined what would be, and I just didn't see that I could sit down and write it. It's just too dull to write. It would not be dull, but I'm not that Stanislavski. I wasn't in that kind of a mood of throwing myself completely into the problems of the problem of one of the characters, which would one of the problems for a writer in writing a play like that is that then you begin to make it better. You know, the play begins to be resolved, and I never wanted to go that far, so I wanted to stay just with the specific scenes, because I found myself altering the whole concept of that play and trying to find what the actress was trying to find in the play, some more hopeful situation. And as that happened, she lost her problem. There was no problem without the play being a depressing one.
But what is your relation to the theater? Because did you ever act on the stage, or?
Yes, I have.
Yes. Because I was talking with Kazan about that last week. He had done both films and plays, theater, and he said that finally the cinema is very, very different from the theater. In fact, for him, the cinema is closer to the novel, though maybe a lot of people think of the two being performing arts, but in fact, it's completely opposite. Do you feel that? I mean, how do you relate to the theater as?
Well, maybe, I don't know what Gadge meant, but I think that what he probably meant was that the theater is a contained form in itself. I mean, it isn't an adaptation. It isn't translating ideas into a different form. Those forms are right there. You write in the form of words as ideas that will paint pictures. In film, you have to paint pictures and accommodate the words to those pictures. the words don't necessarily have anything to do with what is happening, because you have that other dimension of life where you can go in and say absolute lies, and if you do that on the stage, nobody knows what you're saying, because the distance is a little further to the performers, and it's more audio than visual.
No, but I thought of your movies as really the most anti-theatrical in a way, because they try to capture moments of truth and like kind of use of microscope on the faces and on whereas the theater is much more stylized and abstract in a way. It's much more at arm's length. So your aesthetics is very opposed to the.
Well, it's a different form. It's a different form.
No, but there are some directors in the cinema that you can more relate to theatrical. If you see Eisenstein's Ivan the Terrible, or even Wells, where the way they don't shoot like. I don't mean that their films are film plays at all. Yeah. But I mean you can see a theatricality in their films which you could switch to the stage. But in your films, it's very opposite. So I thought that maybe you felt quite distant to the theater. But it's interesting to know that you were writing them as plays before.
Yeah, well, I really just believe that there is a form where if you read the script of opening night, you'll see that it's written quite as a theater piece. I disagree that I'm farther away from the theater, and that those things are very obscure. I mean, those points are minuscule. I don't think they're minuscule. I think the high drama, in terms of what I'm doing anyway, would be thematically. The theme of age is a small thing, is not a large, defined subject. It's frightening because it's like a germ. And once you catch that disease, there is no cure for it. So the very nature of doing small things is the manner and shape of that problem. The theater is extremely formal. So that in the work rehearsal, the work ethic, or the work idea, you go usually to a damp backstage thing and rehearse on the stage with a overhead light. And we have gotten to know that as a theatrical thing. So when we see that on the screen, we recognize it, and it appears to us to be theatrical because it's so familiar, and the truth of it is so familiar. Within the framework of the New York theater, and I was shooting in in Pasadena, California, and in Los Angeles, California. There are no such theaters, and so that we took a much more theatrical approach to what the theater would look like, simply because it would be better to have the essence of the theater there than to have to go out and construct sets that would really look like sets, and not have the age, the several years behind it that it needs to have that feeling, the creaking of the floors and for the actors as they walk along the set to make them feel like they're there. So I mean, we tried to do that. Now we screened the picture in New York, for friends and people in the theater, actors, and they really believed they were in the theater. They really believed that these were actors' problems, and the aging thing. There must have been at least 30 actors now that have come to me and said, "Listen, we have the same problem, or we've just gone through the same problem on Broadway. We're right in the midst of a play that the exact same thing is happening, where people are out 2 days and they're in 1 day and they can't perform because they feel inadequate and incapable of communicating with their audience or having anything of value or worth in themselves to stimulate an audience with," which to me is an age problem. It's a problem of having been there and feeling defeated already.
But it was normal that you should finally come with by doing a film about an actor, because you've always been fascinated by actors, just, the problem of the actor in your films, the part the actors play, which is even more important than any other film, the way you collaborate with them and so on. So normally it should end up by doing a film about an actor's career or an actor's problem.
Yes, the big problem for Jenna, which I think it was the most difficult part, is that she was having a problem, and if she played the play and she was marvelous in the play, there would be absolutely no way that she could have a problem. You see? So the material had nothing really to do with it. In her performing, she couldn't just appear to be bad so that we could suit the storyline. The problem would have to be a real problem so that the audience, too, would be feeling her own incompetence for whatever reason that she had on the stage. And I feel that it had to manifest itself in changes in the play and the theory and of what was wrong with the play, rather than the specific lines of the play or the specific scenes themselves. And I think that from that point of view, I'm quite relieved that we were able to do that, and I think that Jenna carried that off extremely well. Not wanting to play the part, and at times playing it, but you could feel the dissatisfaction of the lack of continuity of any particular place that she had, because she never made that complete communication. It was too spasmodic with her audience. It was in and out, as life is in and out when you have a problem. And I liked it. It was rather heavily loaded with many ideas, which always makes a very difficult picture. And very not so easily defined.
It's very much like a first film. It's packed with different themes. It's like when you make first film, there's a kind of exuberance and baroque, almost in the construction. And the film, though it's your eighth film, ninth film, yeah. It has a look of a first film. It's kind of, it's more. I think it looks more. There was something more in Minian Moscovich and Women Under the Influence. It was as if it was kind of perfection within a certain tendency. But yes. I think it seems to me that Chinese Bookie and this film are kind of new departure for you, in the sense that you are using almost classical situations, classical types of subjects, like the gangster film or the play within the film, which have been done many times. And when you see Faces, or when you see Women Under the Influence, it's kind of look at life without any kind of reference to a cultural, traditional Hollywood subject matter. But Chinese Bookie and this film have been done, many times. Star is Born, or all the gangster films, and all the films about acting, which are kind of. So for you, it was interesting to see your very your approach to reality, which is very different from any type of stylization and formal aspects, and dealing with this kind of subject matter, which is a kind of an archetype or something that has been done many times. Did you feel that you were going into a kind of new experience? Or?
Yes. Obviously, that my life in the theater up to this picture, and Jenna's life in the theater up to this picture, both of these pictures have been so deeply personal, filled with such convictions, not worked out situations that we might be very close to, but we don't really have any idea of the continuity of our lives, because they're spread out over such a long period of time. And so it was a different idea, much more, for instance, in opening night, if you notice, the actress's point of view is not her own, and yet she's got an enormous part. But it's always that we see this woman rather than we are with her. So we never use the device, which is a very simple device that every one of us use, and that is to take the performer's, the main character's point of view. Therefore, the audience begins through that architecture to empathize greatly with the character, or be against the character, whatever. But when you're just looking at a person like a stranger and not knowing them at all, it's very difficult to get behind them, because they are like a stranger. It isn't so easy when you don't see why they are doing these things and what they are doing. And now we have an actress, which is a kind of a mysterious thing, even to actors, of why they're behaving in a certain way. Why did she get drunk the night of the show? I believe that she got drunk because she couldn't go on sober. It was simple as that. I don't think that she could go on sober. Why did they let her go on the stage in such a terrible condition? It's because they want the theater more than anything else. And it has nothing to do with money or sense, sanity. So what they did to her at the end of the play, by throwing on this hopelessly drunk woman who can't even stand up, they threw her onto the stage. She did the exact same thing by trying to save herself, you know, to them, to those people that threw her out onto the stage. And as we see these things develop, they are very hard to construct in a non-clumsy way, because they don't have any root of something that the audience has seen or known before. These are just absolutely new territories. It's walking out into the mud, you know. You don't know when you're going to go over your head or when you're not, or how an audience will behave. Most emotions that filmmakers do are based upon something that they already know, and that they already have seen, and that the audience already knows, and usually agrees with. You know? And when you take a subject that, one, nobody wants to talk about, two, the milieu is one which is strange and obscure to most people, except in a theatricalized form, it becomes a very difficult movie. And yet I feel that particularly the women were, I think, deeply affected by the personal problem of that actress, and by the fact that she is absolutely alone and doesn't know it, and who needs men, even though she's an independent working woman, and who fights like a demon to keep her place in Rome.
But you shot with a real audience.
Yes.
But since you didn't have a complete play, what you had extras, and there were extras that came in the theater.
We some friends of mine put out a few pamphlets and made phone calls and called up different groups and said, would they like to come and be an audience watching a play, a movie being shot, and they would be the audience in the movie. And all they would have to do was just be there. And when opening night came, they said, well, should we dress up and everything? And I said, yes, if you want to. So they all came dressed in in gowns and tuxedos, and it was very interesting because it was many, many days.
But they saw only small scenes because what you were shooting. Well, for instance, the last one. How long is it in the film? The last.
The last scene?
Yes.
It was originally about 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally 20 minutes. Now it's about 7 minutes, 8
Mm-hmm.
minutes.
So they had time to, because it's, they had enough of the play to watch to react, because it's very difficult to react if you have only a small bit.
Yes, we talked to the audience while they were there, because it's a long day in making a film and everything. And in between the scenes, setups have to be made. So we try to prepare so we could go as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be no rehearsal for the audience on the stage, because
Mm-hmm.
you bring the curtain down and they hear what's going on, and then they see it and they become too geared.
Yes.
So what we did is, like when Jen and I did our scene, I just said, all right, let's try it once very straight. I went to the audience and said, we're going to do this scene now, and we want you to behave and react the way you would react. If you don't like it, then don't like it. If you do, then do, and that's the way we'll go. So we played it the first time, and it worked fairly well in a straight way. At the end of the play, they sat there, and we said, we'd like to try it one more time, and perhaps in a different way, because our story is of an actress who is totally drunk on the stage, which we didn't do that time.
Mm-hmm.
So that they were aware of that, and their interest peaked a little bit. Then we did it again. I was terrible. I didn't know what the hell to do myself. And Jenna said, well, what do we, I said, well, we'll play it a little broad now. And then their response was fair. So then we said, all right, now this is what happens when all stops are pulled, and we'll see what happens. So we did it the third time, and that was the third take that was in the film, and they responded as they responded, and they responded very, very well to the relationship between those two people, which had absolutely nothing to do with the play, except that there was a relationship between a man and a woman on a living level rather than a man and a woman on I don't mean to knock English movies, but an English movie. Hello, dear. How are you, dear? I'm fine. How are you? We are getting older. Yes, we are. I get up in the morning, I look in the mirror, and there's something deeply cynical in my face. But instead of doing that, we played at such a height and such a hostility between each other that it became like a situation comedy. With basically the same lines. The changes were that we repeated a line once in a while if there was not a response. We just would repeat our cue to the next person. At the very end, we had written improvisation, which was shot once. Oddly, because you couldn't do it more than once, the improvisational quality, because the audience thought we were leaving the play, which indeed these actors were, but it was written. And we were plenty worried about it. We were very worried what would happen, and so it put the same pressure that those actors would have on us by playing it only that one time. Ben is a marvelous actor. In Chinese bookie, which many people feel as you do, that it's a gangster genre, I don't really feel it is.
I don't think it's a gangster film, but I think it starts. I mean, it's a very Cassavetes film at the end, but at the end, I mean, when it is actually seen on the screen.
Yeah.
I call the end, not the end of the film. But what I mean is that obviously you were. I mean, when you see Faces of Husbands, they don't refer to any specific genre. But here, obviously, a man who is a gambler, who has a striptease, place, and who loses money, gets into the mafia, who asks him to kill somebody, and so on. It's plot that we have seen. But this is not the criticism, but it's something that we have seen, as a starting point, whereas the other films that you did were. So I think it belongs to the genre in terms of reference. Obviously.
I'm going to cry because that isn't really. Obviously, that is true. Obviously, what you're saying is true. And
it's not what is on the screen. It's not what is on the screen.
My motivation for doing the picture was, and this isn't a justification, I would drive on Sunset Boulevard every day to go to work. And along the way, I would see all these strip joints along Sunset Boulevard. And I was wondering, as I went by and looked, you can't help but looking at these pictures, more, come and get it, whatever those expressions are. I was wondering what kind of a person would own a place where groups of people would sit silently, sit there and look at flesh, and what kind of people would perform, and why do they perform in our society? What is this need to be such exhibitionists in a certain area, in a sexual area? And so I went in and I stopped one afternoon on the way back, and I talked to one of these men. And he took me out and he showed me his car, and he told me how many gangsters come into his place. But not all the time, but he told me specifically, according to their importance, who had been in and who knew him. And he also told me that he did his own acts. He structured them, he wrote them, he had the finest girls, the most beautiful girls, and he showed me what he had built in terms of his stage, his sound system, everything. He took enormous pride in this. And I walked in there and I saw a world which was part of an American world, but maybe part of the whole world, because they have strip places everywhere. And I kind of liked that man. And he was a very conventional man. He wore a tie, special shirts made very much like gangster shirts, shoes absolutely done right. When he went out, he wore a hat, looked like Humphrey Bogart. Special cigarette case, holders, fantastic. The glasses were not plastic. Everything in the place was more ornate than most restaurants or most cafes would be. So I went and we finished Woman Under the Influence, and I was going mad in distribution. Distributing the film, talking to theater owners and everything all day long, and it was a business life, and I got panicked. And I thought, what could I do that would be easy to get on, easy to do within the area where we are now? And I got everyone together, all the people. I said, well, anyone like to make a movie? We could start shooting in 2 weeks. And they said, well, what are we going to shoot? And I said, well, I'll write something as we go. We got all the people together, and I started writing this script about how these gangsters want more, and they want more, and they want more. They don't even know what they want. And that the people within that society, which I liken really to all of American life, in that no one knows what they're working for. They only know they want to do it in the right way and be good at what they're doing. But they are mindless because there is nothing to think about, because the object is making money and doing it with style. And so Chinese Bookie was, to me, not a gangster film so much as the ethic, the work ethic in our country being so that you are put in a position of doing your work without any basis of any individuality in your own life, so that you have to apply yourself to what other people want. And a nightclub owner would apply himself to what other people want. Theater people do it, television people do it, everybody in our world, people that sell gas or they...
You only exist for others.
Yes, and there's nothing of yourself. So the society we live in is an anti-art society in that it is conforming to one point of view. And that point of view is what must be done in the manner that it must be done. So this man, when he loses $25,000 in a cheap set-up card game, he thanks everyone because he doesn't want to be the kind of person that would exhibit the wrong kind of emotions. And he shakes their hands. And he says goodbye, and it's all done extremely formally. But it could have been a comedy. That situation to me is so true that it could have been a comedy had Ben gone over and said, thank you very much in a certain way and done it broader. You know, the whole picture would have taken on, he would have become an anti-hero then, which in that sense would have been a hero. But instead he played it with the talent that he has as a good actor, trying to understand that situation. And many people would not want to see innocence being crushed and somebody that's trying in their life being destroyed. In my opinion, and the opinion of Ben and everyone else who worked within the framework of that picture, it's a very necessary picture for people to see, because it shows you that even if you do the right thing, you may not be starting out in a direction that has any validity. You know, I do, you know, it's like saying I will kill people, but I will kill people very nicely. And then you're upset because somebody punishes you for killing them nicely, and I think that that's our age today. It's very pertinent to what is going on, particularly with young people. They are idealistic in their approach to their own violence and their own peculiar withdrawals, and they use life as its example, and life is not particularly a good example as politically or economically is not a good example of how to live your life, in my opinion. Anyway.
No, but I mean, I don't want you to misunderstand me. I didn't mean that the film, as I see it, is a gangster film. I mean, I agree. I mean, what you said about the character and the poetry of the film and the night atmosphere and this loneliness and so on is obviously what is important in the film. It's not the plot. But what I was saying is that you were using the plot and the devices of the gangster film starting, you know, in the same way as in opening night you use the relationship of the theater and the film, which has been done also many times. The result is completely yours, and it has nothing to do with the starting point. But still,
I think I'm a little sensitive about that.
No, but it's a starting point. Whereas in the starting point in your other films was no reference. I don't say it against or for. It's just
Well, in America, you see, we opened the picture in Los Angeles and New York, and the people flocked to go to see the film. And they
which one?
The Chinese book.
Chinese book. Yeah.
And they really went in en masse, and we got absolutely killed by the critics. Killed.
No, what you said about the striptease owner, joint owner, doing what people expect him to do and so on, living for others. That's raises the question of your position in Hollywood, because I, as a filmmaker, because I find between you and me, I mean, I even wrote it in Herald Tribune. I had an interview with Mary Bloom 2 weeks ago. I said that about new American films in the last 3 or 4 years. I find that the movies tend to be very impersonal. I mean, which I never felt as much about Hollywood. I mean, I thought in the early 70s with people like Altman, like Boorman, like Schatzberg, like Bob Rafelson, not to speak of you, of course, but they were really independent artists who were really putting their personal problems, their feelings on the screen, whatever way, but I found in the recent films kind of technical achievements and very little content. I mean, very little feeling. Do you feel this yourself as trying to create in this context?
And talking with other directors, their views all seem to be that we'll be creative within the advisability of the subjects given to us by the major companies or by the money. I mean, we all know that tax shelters make terrible movies, you know, because their whole basis is the money, absolutely as a device to get rid of or to take an advantage through money. We also know that the major companies are going to make hundreds of millions of dollars with a movie, and they will not tolerate somebody departing and taking a gamble at that kind of money. So that experimentation, that the artist is paid for his skill, not for the mind or the feeling. And within that, the Spielbergs and the Lucases and the other people find everybody, you know, the Altmans, everybody begins to work in this paranoid atmosphere of trying to get in to their films, points, ideas, but it isn't the overall film. But the threat of never making another film unless we conform is terrible. And what has happened is the critics and the festivals have always been the only weapon of creative people. It's the only weapon for a young filmmaker coming up. He will never get to make a film if it isn't for the critic and for the festivals.
And even for older filmmakers like you, I mean, independent filmmakers, it's help.
Yes, and now I think that the best thing that a young filmmaker can do is to beat an older filmmaker and a more established filmmaker, such as myself. I would love to go into a festival and have, but I want it to be competitive because that's the only real opportunity for a young filmmaker is to win. I feel terrible because I'm in a position at 48 years old of being a revolutionary, and I don't feel very revolutionary. It's time for me almost to say, look, let me make my films the way I want to, and I don't care really about success or going anywhere or doing anything. I just want to, until I can't do it anymore, I want to just do what I do. And let the young people come and show me the way. You know, to be in a position of having to constantly not fight a creative battle, but go out and fight a commercial battle is terrible. And every young filmmaker is a closet communist. You know, they only come out when the money is there. You know, you offer a young filmmaker a job with Universal Pictures and they will jump up and down and say, I made money. I get a job offered to me with those major companies and I feel depressed. And it's not that I don't want the money. I want the money. That's why I feel depressed that I can't take it. You know, but if at 18 or 20 or 25, somebody is already saying, "Bail me out, save me," what chance do they have to make something of any kind of worth and value? I think that all of us are, in a sense, excited, like a monk in a monastery would be excited over life, over finding some point in life, and then add wings to the monk and allow him to take on these challenges and create a different world, to actually have the capacity to create that different world is a fantastic excitement. It's sexual almost. It's certainly a substitute for living, but it's better than living. And when people begin to say, okay, we can make money on that aspect, because these people will work harder at what they're doing than anyone else in the world, and other people are interested in what they're doing, and they will pay. Then we must protect. Somebody must protect that, and not make it just a whore's game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we can say it's not, but it is. It's for me and it's for everyone else. I'm not making myself alone.
Thank you.